You've dreamed of building a family, but the journey hasn't been easy. I'm Dr. Laura Shaheen, a reproductive endocrinologist helping people build families every day. On our new podcast, Baby or Bust, we'll be learning from both reproductive experts and people who have faced challenges just like yours. Join us every week for Baby or Bust, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure to follow us so you never miss an episode.
Progressive presents Forced Metaphors about bundling your home and auto.
In sports, 3 goals is a hat trick. And when you bundle your home and auto with Progressive, you get a hat trick of great savings and round-the-clock protection. So you might be thinking, wait, that's 2 things. A hat trick is 3. But in this metaphor, great savings counts as 2 goals, and so does round-the-clock protection. So it's like 4 goals, and that's more than 3. It's basic math.
Forced Metaphors. Presented by Progressive. Bundle and protect today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates. Discount not available in all states or situations.
Welcome to the AEW Match Guide podcast, where we deep dive into the best matches in AEW history. Brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network and your host, Sam Brown. Yes, hello, and welcome to the AEW Match Guide podcast. I'm your host, Sam Brown. Thanks for joining me. Every week, alongside a special guest, I take an in-depth look at one of the best matches in AEW history, taken from the definitive AEW Match Guide, as ranked by over 30 wrestling commentators from around the internet wrestling community. If you enjoy the show today, you can subscribe and rate it on the podcast app of your choice. And make sure you check out all the other great shows we have on the Social Suplex Podcast Network that cover all aspects of the world of pro wrestling. My guest for today is Hey Brian, a writer for one of my favorite wrestling sites, Wrestle Inn, and we'll be looking at Kenny Omega versus Rey Fenix for the AEW World Heavyweight Championship from Dynamite on the 6th of January 2021. How are you going today, Brian?
I'm doing great. How are you, Sam?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Thank you for making some time to jump on this podcast with me. I'm really looking forward to getting into this match. It's one that sort of it's flying under the radar a little bit, I think, and there's a lot of really good stuff to get into. So, yeah, looking forward to highlighting that. Now, just as I ask all of my guests on here, because it's your first time, I'm curious, how did you get into AEW, Brian?
So I had been out of wrestling for quite a while. In, I don't know, I'm thinking of what year, maybe around 2016, I started getting a little bit back into it. I'm a teacher and I had a student that was also into wrestling, but like much more heavily than me. So he recommended me to NXT, then to New Japan. And through New Japan is how I got into Kenny Omega and the Bucks. And then from there, I followed them the whole way along until AEW came around. Nice.
Yeah, I mean, that's been a pretty common thread on here that people sort of started getting into the Bucks and the Bucks and Omega in New Japan in Ring of Honor and just sort of followed it through. And it definitely seems to be the way that most of this hardcore audience has sort of come on board, at least.
Yeah, for sure. They're a quick act to get into, right? They're kind of immediately impressionable on people.
Yeah. Was there any like particular moment thing that got into it? Was it the Omega Okada matches, or was it something else?
So the very first New Japan matches I watched were actually the very first one was Ricochet against Ospreay in the Best of Super Junior. That had all kinds of a lot of hype and a lot of critique online. Yeah. So I saw that going on. I was pretty much only watching WWE at that point, a little bit of NXT. So that got me over. And then from there, I started getting into a little more discussion with people on message boards, things like that. Yep. And I think the very next thing after that I got into was trying to catch up on Omega and Okada just from hearing about it. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's I remember when that match happened and just everyone had an opinion on it. It was,
I know.
And I think it was a bit of a rude shock to people who weren't watching that style, because I know that for people, I wasn't one of them. I was relatively new to that style at that point as well. But I remember people who, were familiar with things like PWG, regularly watched Ring of Honor and other indie promotions. That wasn't, I mean, it was spectacular and great, but it wasn't anything that like truly wrecked their minds. But for, you or I getting in from WWE and the most athletic high flyer is AJ Styles, who, is a great high flyer. I'm not trying to knock him, but you go from that to Ricochet versus Ospreay. It's a bit of a
whole other pace, a whole other structure to everything.
Yeah, and the match we're looking at today, actually, Omega versus Fenix, is sort of in that mind-melting vein of style of matches. So let's get into that match. As we always do here, giving it its flowers. Dave Meltzer gave this one 5 of the big ones, 5 stars. Cage match, currently have it rated at 8.82, and when we did the definitive match guide earlier this year, it came in 12th as the 12th best match that AEW had put on in its first 2 years of existence. So high praise from those guys indeed. With the actual build up to this one, these two had faced off a number of times previously, most notably in AAA in 2019, where Kenny Omega beat Fenix to win the AAA Mega Championship, a belt he holds to the day of recording. But there is a match scheduled between now and when this will probably go to air. So he's had quite the reign, we'll just say that. And then these two, of course, also faced each other numerous times in tag matches in AEW, or even outside of AEW as well, including a really fantastic tag title defense in early 2020 when Hangman and Omega took on the Lucha Bros. Brian, how familiar were you with the work that these guys had done up until this match?
I had a lot more at that point with Omega, and then Fenix I've mostly watched in Lucha Underground, which he's one of the 2 or 3 top people over there. Yeah. And that was such a unique place to watch him, but
absolutely,
obviously a whole other style of things going on in Lucha Underground.
Yeah, I've got a friend, actually, this is a bit off topic, but who just yearns for the days of Pentagon in Lucha Underground, and he constantly wants Pentagon. He's constantly cheering for Pentagon to snap Fenix's arm and break up the tag team, because he just wants to see that act again in AEW. But
Pentagon was something else when he was there. I know. Even Phoenix was like kind of he's sort of like wavered between like heel and babyface, him and Penta, but never like that. Penta's never gotten quite to that high level of brutality, and Fenix has never really gotten to the same level of like underdog that he is. He's much more of a top level guy than he was, I think, there.
Yeah.
Or maybe top level is the right word, but you know what I mean? Like he was always kind of overcoming the odds in all of his matches down there.
Yeah. And in AEW, I mean, he'd been positioned as mostly a tag wrestler. He'd done plenty of a bit of singles work. And of course, these two were supposed to meet in the semifinals of the AEW Championship Contenders Tournament that they held in late October in the lead up to Full Gear, which Kenny Omega would eventually win. But of course, Fenix, who beat Pentagon in the opening round, he suffered a concussion. Kenny Omega, of course, in the opening round completely murked Sonny Kiss. But yeah, as I said, Fenix suffered a concussion, a suspected neck injury, so he had to sit out that tournament, and Omega ended up taking on Pentagon. But upon returning to AEW, Pentagon, he would reunite with Pentagon, and they were running through numerous singles and tag programs at that time involving Eddie Kingston, the Butcher and the Blade, Lance Archer. There was a whole lot of different webs of storytelling going on there. And while that was happening, of course, Omega would go on to win the tournament and then face Jon Moxley at Winter is Coming, after winning the Contenders Tournament. And that is where he would properly debut this partnership with Don Callis. He would fully commit to his heel turn. And of course, he would beat Jon Moxley and become the AEW World Championship match. World Championship match. Become the AEW World Champion at that point. Brian, how did you feel about like the positioning of both of these guys in the lead up to this match?
So this is something that AEW persistently does pretty well, and it's that the stories aren't so singular, right? They tie one thing to the other pretty well. So you had you mentioned Kenny smashing Sonny Kiss at one point, right, going through the tournament, and then eventually to set up this match with Fenix, he has a match with Joey Janela, which he wins also pretty handily. Pac comes out. You have all the kind of like hinting back to the great match that Pac and Kenny had about a year before. And instead, he kind of sets up the match with Kenny and Fenix, who's hadn't been beaten by Kenny Omega, was never really eliminated from the tournament. So you've got this perfect web going through a few different people, drawing a lot of stuff together. So I really thought it was well built.
Personally, I felt like Fenix was a little bit unfocused at this point. Sort of a lot of the stuff that was happening with the Lucha Bros and Death Triangle. And as, of course, I said, Eddie Kingston was in the mix. And I at that time, it wasn't hitting for me. other than I did really like the match between Pentagon and Fenix. That was
right.
a really good match.
Great.
And then of course when these two face off, that's just a match graphic that you're immediately interested in. But as you said, like storyline wise for these two, as you said, like Omega, he took on Joey Janela before this, which was of course the matchup he was meant to have in the first round as well. Joey Janela also was affected by injury and couldn't make that. So he beat Joey Janela. And then of course, what's the other string that needs to be sort of sorted out and tied up? It's Fenix. I think for Kenny on the Kenny Omega side of things, I don't know how you felt, but I feel like he had a bit to prove going into this championship run. I'm a huge Mox fan, but I don't think like the Winter is Coming match really hit on all cylinders. It had a really great end, but I don't think like the start of it went well. That's not necessarily a majority opinion out there. There's a lot of people who really love that match. So that's my personal feelings on it. I don't think it's factual by any means. Of course, Omega had a great match with Paige, but there was still the chatter out there of, the people asking, when are we going to see this New Japan wrestling god Kenny Omega, particularly from the people who'd never actually seen that and were starting to think, what's this guy we were sold on? Is this really the best that he can do? Particularly because some people were talking up the matches with Paige and with Moxley as being great. And I don't think they reached that level. Grading on a curve, I'm going to say he hadn't had a lot of single success. Like for most people, they would be incredible matches. But for Kenny Omega and the reputation he has, I think he went into this match with a bit to prove. How did you feel?
I think that kind of makes sense. A lot of his, obviously there was like the really good tag run, and when you had done the match rankings, I had put Hangman and Kenny versus the Young Bucks as my top match, and I think it's still, like, even looking back on it, it's probably sitting at my, like, one of my 2 or 3 favorite matches ever, just how many times I've rewatched it in only a year and a half, right? But that's where, like, a lot of his a lot of the main storytelling with Kenny has come out of that. It was never really about like him personally, like the way it was in Japan, where this was all about journey to the top and all the steps he had to go through and everything with Coda, right? And instead of that, we're getting the things with tag matches. We're getting some very good singles matches, but a lot of like one-off things, right? Like he had the lights out matches he had, and like things like that were sort of these like, like couple week builds, side stories, very, very good, but not the same sort of like Kenny Omega building things up over 6 months or over a year, things like that we saw in Japan.
Yeah, I think sadly, as Rich Latta, who I had on a number of weeks ago now, and we talked about the Pac match, he sort of said with Kenny Omega, it's hard to get a gauge on how the audience actually feels, because that's not how I felt. Like, I feel like he had something to prove to other people, not myself personally. But sometimes you don't know, because Kenny Omega seems to attract some of the worst faith takes, I think, because his reputation has been so pushed up. There's people who just purely don't like him because people have talked him up so much. And so sometimes you don't really know where people are coming from when they have these takes that, Kenny Omega has something to prove, or he isn't living up to the expectation people had for him. But I know there's people out there who had good faith takes that wasn't that he hadn't hit as they thought he might have, and as they had been told that he would. So, and certainly this was going to be this is the first defense of his championship, and this run is going to become something absolutely incredible. And I think by now he's silenced absolutely everyone with the idea that he can't be both the worker that he was previously and also like a genuine North American TV wrestling draw. I think he's completely silenced those critics objectively and subjectively in terms of like the measurable metrics, but also, just subjective takes on how good his matches have been. But at this point, those whispers in good faith were louder than I think they would be at the end of it all.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of it stands out just because anyone that was already familiar with him knew that there was not really anything to it.
Yeah.
And either you didn't know much about him and you're reserving your opinion, or you knew what he was capable of, and that's just how it was going to go, right?
Or you're just a dickhead who wanted to troll people.
And you just have things to say, yeah.
Anyway, look, let's get into things here. Let's get into this actual match, because we have a lot of – this is a match that went a mile a minute, so we've got a fair bit to cover.
It's so cool. I know. It's so cool.
Yeah, of course, this took place at New Year's Smash. It was delayed 1 week due to the Brody Lee tribute show. It started out with Pac doing a promo in picture-in-picture as Rey entered. I'm always down for a Pac promo, so that's an immediate tick for me. And then Kenny, of course, gets one of those absolutely absurd Justin Roberts introductions that he was getting at the time. I'm kind of glad they dropped that thing once they got back to sort of live crowds. But it did work in the moment. But, seeing now, I feel like it was a little bit corny. What did you think of those giant introductions that Omega was getting?
He had it going for a pretty good while, right? So I think the idea, right, with and at this match too, he still has the dancers, the cleaner dancers coming out to sweep his way to the ring for him, right? So he kind of went all in, right? The moment he gets with Callis, he goes all in on the over the top personality. Yeah. So it worked for that, I think, right? Yep. He made the point. Yeah. They figured out kind of other ways to make him obnoxious as they've gone along, right? Yeah. As they he's kept it fresh.
Yeah, as we said, this match is a mile a minute, and they start off at that pace. They don't spend a whole lot of time grappling, thankfully, which is not what you want when you see these two on a match graphic. You don't buy it to see them exchange wrist locks. And as I said, it's going to be impossible for me to say every single move. Like right from the get-go, Fenix is hitting things at pace, 2 big Hurricanranas, throws Kenny to the outside, and follows up from the apron to Kenny standing on the outside, like just straight away is going all guns blazing. What stood out to you in the early exchanges of this match?
So these two guys, I think this is something I notice every time I watch it. And I remember this from the first couple times I watched Kenny in New Japan, is he runs the ropes at such a crazy pace. Yeah. So hard, right? He marks up his back every time he does it, right? And then Fenix comes in every time you see him, and he does that even faster. So these are like two of the absolute top athletes in all of wrestling going at it too, right? So it only makes sense that they get right into everything, and the TV time limit, kind of squeezes things together a little bit. So you're getting a lot of the classic Kenny spots, but you get it all condensed into a super tight package.
Yeah, I really liked how early on they just so quickly set up what the story of this match was going to be in the ring, which is that like Fenix has the sort of the speed and athletic edge, but Kenny Omega has enough to keep up, but he is the hardest striker and he has the power. And you immediately see that when Kenny's in the corner, Fenix charges at him and Kenny is just able to dodge and then is able to get some strikes in, which sort of shows his power. But of course, Fenix has already shown that he has the speed edge by hitting those Hurricanranas early. So, and there's just this crazy spot where Fenix like rolls over the railings to do a pop-up cutter and Omega catches him in a Snapdragon, and it's just like so seamless. 99% of wrestlers couldn't pull that sort of thing off, but these guys just so flawlessly managed to take these two really complicated moves and make them work together.
Yeah, they weave those together not only, seamlessly, but on the outside too, not even in the ring.
Yeah. And early on in the match, like Fenix, he's just like for the first stretch, I guess, of the match, Fenix is just like incredible. He's just one of those guys, as you said, like you're talking about them running the ropes. Like with Fenix, he is one of those guys that sort of gets like an extra 30 centimeters of air and like extra probably not 10 seconds, but an extra second of hang time when he goes for something, and, almost defying gravity sort of way that he jumps around things. And then, of course, he's got that balance on the ropes where he'll bounce between the ropes and then so easily and effortlessly launch himself off of them there's zero wobbling, there's zero hesitation from him. He just does it like it's second nature. And
it looks so easy. I know it doesn't seem right.
Yeah. And then, of course, like his topes, the way he just like throws himself into topes, I feel like he makes everyone else, particularly like some of the bigger guys that do topes, like a Cody or a Moxley, he just makes those topes look so cheap and so slow with the way he just like throws his body into them.
The only person I think that goes at them that hard in AEW is probably Darby, but the fact that Phoenix is of that height and build and the kind of smoothness, he always seems to land them with the speed and impact at the same time. It's still like a step above anybody else.
Yeah, because for a lot of people, when they do the topes, they'll dive through the ropes with their arms outstretched, and it's almost just like a diving push. But he'll go through the ropes and then curl his body around and hit like an upside down cannonball into his opponent, like he's, just throw. As I said, like a cannonball, like hurling himself like a cannonball at his opponent to not only push them into the thing, but impact them with such force that it hurts them. Just early on in this, Phoenix is just he's on a rip.
That's right.
Then, of course, once Kenny Omega manages to kind of catch up a little bit, we get a big chop exchange in the middle where Kenny gets the better of it, and he's able to even draw blood on Phoenix's chest as Phoenix throws himself into the topes. Kenny is underrated in how hard he hits his strikes in this.
He's strong. I know you don't get you see it with the knees. Everybody knows it with the knees, but the way if you see what not that Bryan Danielson doesn't frequently look like, he did, but after the Grand Slam match, what he looked like, what Kenny did to his chest was something else.
Yeah, I feel like, mate, you know how many years ago Vince McMahon pre-cut himself so that when Kevin Owens headbutted him, he would bleed. I feel like Bryan Danielson does that on his chest for chops.
He might just be running out of skin there at this point. I don't even know.
He's got Ric Flair skin on his chest. There was some interesting banter between the commentators on this match. There was Excalibur, JR, Tony, and special guest Chris Jericho talking about things like the temperature, like how cold it was, and they're doing these massive chop exchanges, which
they're outside at Bailey's place. That's right.
Yeah. And I really like those observations and how they sort of not influence, but just speak to what's going on in the match. And it's like real insider things you wouldn't think of. They're the kind of things that a commentator should be adding onto it. So I really appreciated what that was. And I love
things you can't actually see on TV.
Yeah. And I love Chris Jericho just being Chris Jericho, claiming he's never cheated his career. And also talking about the money.
I defy you to find one piece of evidence of this or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And you'd have to go back, as far as 3 weeks or something. What did you think of the commentary just in general in this match?
So I think a lot of the times it can get a little, if you have the 4 guys there, it can get a little overwhelming, but they were very careful to kind of let the action of the match dictate the commentary itself, right? So nobody's stepping over each other. Jericho, from other times he's been on rampages, and when he's filled in on Dynamite, he can be all over the place, right? He can be at 200%, and he can also mellow out a bit. So he kind of tones it down just enough that he's not choking out Excalibur talking. Tony kind of lays pretty low during this match, but he still has a few interesting things to say. So they did a really good job.
Yeah, Chris Jericho's divisive on commentary. I really like him personally, but yeah, you're right that sometimes he's possibly a little bit much and possibly, walking all over the other guy.
Progressive presents Forced Metaphors about bundling your home and auto.
In sports, 3 goals is a hat trick. And when you bundle your home and auto with Progressive, you get a hat trick of great savings and round-the-clock protection. So you might be thinking, wait, that's 2 things. A hat trick is 3. But in this metaphor, great savings counts as 2 goals, and so does round-the-clock protection. So it's 4 goals, and that's more than 3. It's basic math.
Forced Metaphors, presented by Progressive. Bundle and protect today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Discount not available in all states or situations.
At Walgreens, we know February is the season for L-O-V-E. It's also something sweet for your sweetheart season. Or my favorite, wait, that's today's season? Or the just found out my kid has a crush season. Good luck, Mom. This Valentine's Day, Walgreens makes it easy to quickly get last-minute gifts with pickup in as little as 30 minutes. Because if it's Cupid season, it's Walgreens season.
Right now, select fragrances are 20% off. Offer valid through 2/26 while supplies last. Restrictions apply. See Walgreens.com for details.
As on commentary, I think particularly when Mark Henry was on the desk when Rampage was just starting. Like, the poor bloke never got a word in because
I don't think he was quite ready to keep up with that sort of thing yet, right? It wasn't like sitting next to JR who's just bouncing things back off you.
Yeah. And I think also for Jericho, he's got a very high-pitched voice, and so I feel like that probably it sits above the rest of the register of everyone, so it really stands out.
He's got that rock singing voice, right? His band, he knows what he's doing, I guess.
Yeah.
He knows how to work the microphone.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's I'm surprised he doesn't go, like, his throat doesn't hurt after screaming for 2 hours on a Dynamite or something, but he makes it work.
That might be easier than the shows he does. I don't know.
I don't know much more about Fozzy than Judas, to be honest, so I don't know what the rest of the songs are like. But
I don't either.
As I said, like, Phoenix was really on a tear at the start of this match, but Omega's the one that sort of kicks things up a gear, like at about the 2/3 mark through this match.
Yeah, it's a really good transition, like you're saying, with the chops and everything. It's just like a really clear line of like, no, I'm taking over. This match is not your style anymore. This is my way to go now.
Yeah, and as I said, like, that power and the striking particularly is what levels things up. He like weathers that early storm from the speed that Phoenix has, but speed goes off quickly, I guess, and because he was able to weather it, he's then able to and slow Phoenix down. He's then able to land his more heavy hitting offense. He hits a bunch of really incredible looking V triggers. There was one that, my favorite was the one he just like completely bended Phoenix back on top of himself. What was your favorite out of this stanza of things from Omega?
I don't know if it's the same point you're talking about, but I had one written down because I was just so excited about this. But I watched it like 10 times. But he's got Phoenix kind of like wobbled in the center of the ring. He cracks him with the V trigger. Phoenix flops down, hits the kip up back up to super kick Omega with like his last bit of energy, and they both go down for like a little break. But the impacts that Phoenix takes on the ground between the knee and his bump onto the ground, I can't believe how he popped back up off of it.
Yeah. Both of these guys are guys who, as I said, we've had a lot of matches before, and they seem to both love like really laying it in, or at least they are so perfectly timed that we think they're really laying it in. So, yeah,
a little of each. I think it depends. Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, as we said, Phoenix does have like a last gasp of adrenaline, where he manages to outspeed Omega a little bit, hits like an insane suplex, but then he's taking too long to hit the frog splash that he's going for.
He goes up and does the Eddie Guerrero kind of taunt at Omega. He's up there for a little too long. Yeah.
Yeah. Kenny gets the knees up and hits the Tiger Driver 98, a V trigger, and then a one-winged angel for the win. What did you think of the ending streak of this?
It's really good. So I thought it was excellent. The I don't know if it's I don't want to say it's missing. I think one of the things I often like in Omega's matches is he's great at mixing in these sequences of reversals and twists and turns. But this match he lays out a little bit different, right? They kind of get a lot of that in like along the way rather than I don't know, say like you look back to a lot of the ending sequences with Okada where they're going back and forth, reversing everything, twisting around, like, because they know each other's moves, right? And him and Phoenix kind of do the same thing, but instead they play it out through the whole match. So he gets to the ending and it's just like he turned it on all of a sudden. But for what they're going for, right? This is his first title defense. It makes a lot of sense. It's very smart that he's got to be like, when he's ready to take over, like, that's it. No one gets him.
Yeah. I would have loved to have seen like these two doing a extended sequence of countering the one-winged angel, because that's such a great move for countering. Any move that takes a lot of steps to set up, you've got like him hoisting on the shoulders, you've got him grabbing, you've got him like doing the flip down. It is just rife with opportunities for interesting counters, and Phoenix is so athletic that he would really be able to do something spectacular off that. But of course, as you said, like this match is actually serving dual purposes, and part of it is to really establish Kenny Omega as that like really high level and really the new boss of AEW, the new top guy in AEW. And Phoenix wasn't in a position where having him go 50-50 in the ending with Omega is necessarily what you want, like your absolute top guy to be doing. So,
right.
It's here and there. And as you said, like they did enough throughout the match to really get you in, both get you into it, but also like excite and pump up your adrenaline.
Yeah. It's interesting too, because I watched the AAA match, not the AAA Championship match where Kenny won the belt from Fenix not too long ago, and between that one and this one, and they have the 3-on-3, I think 2 of them, right? There was one at Fyter Fest where they have Laredo Kid in there, and Kenny's with the Bucks, and between all of that, you with everything you got between Kenny and Fenix, there's definitely more to it. So like this is something they could definitely come back to. Like they could do another title match. They could do something else. There's a lot more that they could explore.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And just blistering pace, breathtaking moves. These two just worked so well together. These are like the absolute prime of working talent in AEW. I think like on that level, you could maybe like throw Pac in, just in terms of pure workers. I guess, I mean, the Bucks, they're a tag team, but particularly Nick Jackson is very breathtaking in his own right. And then, of course, you've got some of the up-and-comers like like your Darby Allin, Jungle Boy, Dante Martin, who, will be hitting that. But in terms of the guys who are in their prime at that point,
it's a small group.
Yeah. And I've left out some big names like, your Moxleys, your Cody Rhodes, but that's because their strengths are in different things, really. And I think that's not a slam against those guys. Those guys have got other strengths, but for pure working talent, these guys are the absolute cream of AEW's crop, and they really turned one on here.
Oh, for sure. You could make a really legitimate argument that either of them are the best worker in AEW, or like you could probably make a pretty compelling case either of them are the best in the world too, depending on how you want to look at it.
Absolutely. I feel like for 2021, he's got to have that kind of award sewn up with the stuff he's been doing, barring, a late charge from Danielson, and, maybe some other things going down. But right now, when we're recording this, at least, you'd think he's well and truly in the box seat for that sort of award. I wanted to get into the post-match, though, because a lot of really interesting, like, shared universe storytelling happens here, and a lot of things that are going to set up what's going to happen in AEW for the rest of 2021 take place in the post-match. And I'd actually forgotten that all of this stuff went down after the Phoenix match. So it was kind of cool when I went back to rewatch and noticed that, okay, so this is when Don Callis gets on the mic. They say they're going to end Phoenix's career. Cuts to the TV, and Eddie Kingston and the Butcher and the Blade have Penta and Pac tied up. As we said, like Eddie and the Butcher and the Blade had been going back and forth with Death Triangle. And so they, I guess Kenny and Don Callis had colluded with those guys to lock these guys up, which is interesting given where Eddie Kingston's going to end up in a couple of months' time.
Very quickly after.
At the end of the Kenny Omega and John Moxley feud. And as Kenny Omega, speak of the devil, as Kenny Omega goes for a second one-winged angel, John Moxley runs out with a barbed wire bat, only for the Good Brothers, the Impact Tag Team Champions, to intercept, attacking Mox, and that broke down the Forbidden Door. That was the first time they had appeared on TV, and that was when it was like, 2021 is going to be the year that we see people coming from each and everywhere into AEW after 2020 had been, this closed area in Daly's place. Suddenly
they could barely keep their own talent in there.
Exploding.
The Good Brothers running out. That's a long way from Callis showing up right off Impact, just being an on-air talent, but not in the same way as Kenny's buddies, two wrestlers actually coming out and doing kind of the old school crossing the territories kind of thing.
And certainly Callis had always been linked to Kenny, but the stuff that the Good Brothers were linked to with the Bullet Club, which we're going to get to in a second, is not something Callis had been linked to. So when you see the Good Brothers come out and then it starts this brawl where the AEW talent, the face talent that are in the stands, see these people who have showed up from another promotion attacking John Moxley, who is like the hero of AEW at this point. They clear and they jump in and try and save Moxley, but get beaten down. And then, of course, the Bucks come out and help clear the ring, which culminates in all 5 men doing the 2 Sweet for the first time in years, re-establishing that Bullet Club connection, which of course then brings in New Japan into the equation as well as Impact, and I guess re-establishing this connection that these guys have with possibly one of the most influential and infamous factions in wrestling in the last 10 years. Probably the most, I think, between them and the Shield,
sure. Yeah.
The most influential and well-known factions in wrestling. How did you feel when all of this happened?
I was kind of like you, and I had forgotten that this was all in a singular episode until I went back to watch it, which was just crazy, like how much they packed into that show. I think like before that, so you had Kenny at that point with the AAA belts and, a few weeks before with the AEW championship. And that was probably when you started to hear like a little bit of chatter about like, oh, I wonder what kind of things Kenny could do. Would he go back to New Japan to try to go for, that sort of stuff.
I think like a couple of days earlier, Kota Ibushi had won the IWGP heavyweight.
That's right.
And of course, Kenny and Kota have got that relationship. So there's a lot of speculation. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very nice symmetry, especially with the way Kota won it, everything he went through to get to the top there, right? And then Kenny kind of doing it the opposite way, taking a shortcut with Moxley, having 2 rounds of his competition out with injuries, right? So a very different path to the top. And it was, it felt more just like, oh, like, wouldn't it be fun if that kind of thing happened, right? But no, I don't think anyone was really like actually expecting it, right? Because you kind of you always have those sort of things as wrestling fans, or any kind of like media where there's any kind of like big corporate divide on things. You never really expect that to actually happen.
And if Kota Ibushi and Kenny Omega like so much as wink at the same time, then there's going to be a certain section of the fandom that goes nuts. It starts speculating about what it means. So.
He liked a tweet the other day, I think, that mentioned Kenny, and that was enough that I saw it about 100 times on my timeline.
Yeah, man. Like when I just remember seeing this and just the possibilities that it brought up were so fantastic. And to stage it at the start of the year, I mean, as we know, it was going to be at the end of the year, but either at this end of the year or the start of the year, there's this idea of renewal, an idea of, I guess, like setting the scene for what's to come, and how much of a big deal has, this Impact connection, at least initially, been with Kenny Omega going over and winning those titles, becoming the belt collector. And then, of course, there were other AEW talent that went over there, and the Good Brothers would become a regular staple on AEW TV in 2021. And then, of course, as we said, Bullet Club has got that New Japan connection. Within a month, Kenta would show up. And then later on, we'd see all of the different New Japan talent that would come across to interact, be it like Rocky Romero, be it the New Japan dads that John Moxley fought and Eddie Kingston fought, Minoru Suzuki showing. Like it really was an incredible piece of timing for when they're going to do this, to like set the table for what's to come in the year.
Yeah, just a few months before they get the crowds back, you get travel restrictions lifted. It was just like excellent foresight, right? Like if they were going to do this, like that was just the right time for it.
Yeah. Moving into like, I guess the next portion where we talk about like the legacy of the match. One question that I've got is, did all of that stuff overshadow the match? Because I know, as we said, both of us, this is one that we'd forgotten this happened at the end of the match. Right. And I feel like this is a match that hasn't got the love that it necessarily deserves, given how good it is and how mind-melting it is. Do you think part of that could be what's happened in the post-match?
I'm not sure. Since, like you said, like personally, we'd each forgotten it. I would say, to me, it hadn't overshadowed it. I don't know if that's the case in other people's minds, but I do agree that it kind of got quite underrated sort of quickly. I was thinking about it earlier, and I was looking at some of the ways I had like matches ranked earlier in the year, and I think at that point, or not at that point, at the point we had done the match ranking guide, I think it was my number 2 match for 2021 after in AEW after Britt Baker against Thunder Rosa and that lights out match. But what's crazy, like even at this point, just over the last few months, I think it's probably been knocked down a few pegs, at least on my own personal rankings. You have the Bucks against the Lucha Bros in the cage and things like that. Just some of the other crazy things Phoenix and Penta have been doing.
Omega and Danielson.
Danielson.
Yep.
So it's if anything, I think it was probably kind of quickly lost in the shuffle because of all the other stuff, like you were saying. But it's probably, even more so now with how excellent the match quality's been lately.
Yeah. This was very much, and I absolutely agree with you. Like, I feel like because it happened at the start of the year as well, it does sort of, in the match of the year stuff talk, it is easily forgotten because it was so long ago. And as
I couldn't believe it was this year. Like, I was looking at the dates and everything, and I was like, I really wasn't pegging it as 2021, even though like I know it is, but just like I was like, I can't believe that was the same year with all these other like great matches you've seen. Yeah.
And I think also, I mean, this is overshadowing it in a totally different way, but I do think like wrestling was still very much grieving the death of Brody Lee at that point. This was the week after the tribute show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's still like fresh in people's minds. So that seems for me like that's the big event that happened at that point of the year. And even though this is an incredible match, it just, I don't know, it struggles to have breathing room amongst these giant things that are happening in wrestling in general, not just in AEW, but in pro wrestling across the board.
Yeah, and I think a lot of, like, if you're looking back that far in the year, like, you're probably, like we had brought up earlier, you're looking back to like Wrestle Kingdom and things like that. If you're looking for like early contenders with all you had a lot of great stuff. That was just a week before.
And this is very much a TV match as well. Like, it's not, it is, as we said, it's sort of truncated. You didn't have that big extended finishing sequence that they probably could have done if they wanted to, but they didn't because they've got other things they need to do with the time that's allotted to this segment. So I guess a fair comparison would be like, how does this compare to the other pantheon of really great AEW TV matches, singles TV matches? Like, you've got your Puck versus Omega, of course. Danielson versus Omega comes to mind immediately as well. In my mind, I'm thinking this is a very different kind of match, two very different kinds of matches, but also Eddie Kingston versus Bryan Danielson, and another one that I love and will just ride so hard for is Jon Moxley versus Darby Allin, which is a singles match. It's very different to this one, but I think is fantastic. Where do you think it ranks amongst those ones? And are there other ones that kind of spring to mind when you're sort of looking at where Omega versus Phoenix ranks?
Yeah, it's got to be up there. Like I was saying earlier, I think at one point in the year, it was probably my second favorite TV match this year. And then if you extend back to like the beginning of Dynamite, you've got stuff like this is another one I think that kind of gets forgotten about, but Nick Jackson and Phoenix is another like truly incredible. I think it's only around 12 minutes, but just like wall to wall excellence, set pieces and
that's the closest thing Phoenix will get to ever wrestling himself.
Yeah, just like two absolutely like seamless wrestlers that never stop moving the entire time. It's unreal that they could be that quick and that exciting and also basically never mess anything up. I don't know how they do it, but it's up there. Like there's like a handful that kind of muddle together, but between that, you've got, Rampage on for TV matches now too. And, even stuff like you have Danielson and Minoru Suzuki wrestling on YouTube
crazy
recently. And it's I don't want to say it's not like deserving of being in the top, but I wouldn't blame anyone if it like, say, dropped out of their top 10 just because of the quality of a lot of other stuff that's been around.
I guess part of it is just like the fact that this match isn't necessarily on the tip of everyone's tongue is not because it's at all bad. And I don't think anyone would say that. I think it's just we're spoiled in AEW. Like watching AEW, we are spoiled with incredible matches, and particularly even looking at the performers, like looking at Kenny Omega, looking at Phoenix, like we are spoiled with incredible matches that these guys participate in. So
it's maybe a lack of like you have like a pretty decent quick build over the course of a few weeks, and it does call back stuff from weeks and even from the month before. There's some like excellent like callbacks as they're getting the story together, but it's not like Moxley and Kenny where they had been going literally since like the beginning of AEW. It's not like that kind of thing, or Hangman and Kenny, which have been going since before the beginning of AEW. It's not like that sort of a story where you're getting constant reminders about it, right? Like if we got another round of Kenny in a tag team going against the Lucha Bros, or if either Penta or Fenix came back around to challenge Kenny for something later on, then I think you might get people reaching back to this one and being like, oh yeah, like remember how great that was, but let's look back at that one.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't have a lot more to say. I think, as we've said, like this is a tremendous match that probably hasn't got the love it necessarily deserves, but just simply because we are so spoiled as fans of AEW, and what a great thing to be able to say. And it was really fun to go back and look at this match. So I do appreciate you picking this one out of the list. Before we go, did you have anything to add? And if not, where can people find you, Brian?
So you could find me writing for Wrestle Inn, WrestleIn.com. You could find me on Twitter at hey_Brian. And anything I write about, I'd post on there.
Yep, definitely check that out as well. And as you know, you can find me at Sir_Samuel. If you want to come and talk about this match, I would absolutely love to. And of course, you can find this podcast every Friday on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. If you did enjoy this episode, I'd love to hear about it. I'd love if you could review the podcast and, of course, subscribe to it. And, while you're at it, why not tell a friend, tell someone else to come listen to us and come share in the love. Brian, it's been really fantastic having you on here. Thank you for making time for me today. I really do appreciate it. And thank you to the good people out there for listening in. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I will see you again next week. Thanks for listening to the AEW Match Guide podcast. If you enjoyed the show, then you can subscribe on the podcast app of your choice so you never miss an episode. Also, feel free to let me know on Twitter at Sir_Samuel. I'd love to hear from you. The AEW Match Guide podcast is brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network, where you can find many other fantastic podcasts discussing not just AEW, but all parts of the world of professional wrestling. Looking forward to seeing you again next week. I'm Sam Brown.
Hi, I'm Flo from Progressive. Being a baseball fanatic like me can be stressful. It's not all sports points and touchdowns. So Progressive is going to help you take your mind off your team for a moment. Instead of thinking about how they missed that goal point score, think about the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, letting you choose coverage options based on your budget. Unlike your team that missed the end zone net area. Well, anyway, hope this distraction about Progressive's Name Your Price tool was helpful. It sure kept me from thinking about all those penalty balls. Yay, sports!
Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Love getting prices that are lower than low on food that's fresher than fresh? Then shop at Kroger. We give you more ways to save on the fresh you love with tools like the Kroger app, where you can find personalized coupons on top of weekly sales, giving you prices that are lower than the everyday low. Kroger, fresh for everyone.
Get more ways to save at the Buy 5 or More Save $1 each sale. Just buy 5 or more participating items and save $1 each with card. Kroger, fresh for everyone.